All right, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Well, President Trump has dropped his lawsuit against the IRS in exchange for the creation of what Democrats are calling a slush fund for his allies, and what supporters call justice for the wrongly targeted, and what the Department of Justice simply calls an anti-weaponization fund. But for our main topic today, we are going to dig into the cost of living crisis, especially as it impacts young Americans. Gen Z young adults say that they are totally cooked and are not very convinced by the old advice that what they need is to cultivate a crisp handshake and better budgeting skills. How right are they? I don't know. We are going to find out, and we are also going to talk about what is actually going on with our economy. And for Unhinged, we have press members at it again. This time, credentialed New York City media are blatantly out in support of the murderer of Brian Thompson. All of this on episode 537 of the In the Tank podcast. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I'm Linnea Lukin, your host, and as always, we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute, and special welcome, everyone, to Heartland's State Government Relations Manager, Samantha Fillmore. Thank you so much for being on, Samantha. We called you like super last minute for this, so I'm really glad you were able to make it. And as always, guys, we also have producer Andy Singer in the background, keeping us moving along, and also cutting me off with funny drops. So as is his duty. All right. So before we get started, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like the video. And remember that sharing it helps us to break through YouTube's suppression. They really do not like us. Even just leaving a comment helps too. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. All right, I'm going to get us moving along here because Samantha cannot stay for the whole show today. But if you guys have any big news that you want to mention to the chat here at the top of the show, anybody? I'm singled out. Nope, nobody has a. All right. Then we will move it along. All right, so we're going to start with Unhinged, and I have not watched the clips for this yet. As usual, I try not to watch them unless I already accidentally came across them, but oftentimes Jim is the one who finds these for us. And apparently he really found a doozy, so I will be leaning on Jim for this. We can just play the clip now. We have credentialed press corps members outside of the murder hearing of Luigi Mangione, and we are going to see what they have to say.
That's all I want to say. Brian Thompson, mom, that lady who said something on Inside Edition. I said what I said. I don't give a fuck.
His children are better off without him. They need to learn to not be like their dad and enjoy the blood money, kids.
I'm standing on this as Brian Thompson. I don't give a fuck. He died. Millions of Americans.
I liked it. Brian Thompson was a terrorist, and more people should acknowledge this and be appropriate. You should be dancing on the graves of the people who profit off of killing you. That's completely called for, is precedented and normal. This has gone on for too long. This should have happened decades ago. Okay, this is long overdue. I had been waiting for someone like this mysterious hero to appear. He answered my prayers.
If you guys are okay with someone like Brian Thompson being around and that being a part of our society, that says more about you as a person, because you look absolutely monstrous defending someone like that who participates in social murder. That's what we
mass social murder. He's responsible for more deaths than Osama bin Laden, and I remember Americans celebrating when Osama bin Laden was killed. It's not like we don't understand heroic violence or like when violence is good. There's like, that's like, as America gets.
I mean, why do we protect the Second Amendment so much? Is it to allow people to shoot up schools, or is it for us to protect our democracy? I think it's to protect our democracy. Not saying, you know, we should all take up arms, but when your democracy is eroded and there's no other option, like, what are we meant to do? What are we left with?
We're backed up into a corner. I mean, if we can't change the world, I don't want to be here, so we don't have a choice. That's why, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures.
I liked it, says the goth girl. I wanted you to see the mannerisms. I want you to see the cutesy curtsy. I want you to see the hand signals as they talk about Brian Thompson being somehow similar to Osama bin Laden. So, Stacey, the reason that I want you to see all that is not to give those young ladies fame. I want you to see all that to understand that those are the people that will smile and giggle and curtsy and hand gesture you on your way to the gallows. What I'm providing you today is not fame. I'm providing you knowledge. And perhaps for them, infamy.
Yeah, I have a feeling, Jim, that you probably have a lot to say about this. So I'm gonna just hand it off to you right away.
Yeah, I got something to say about it. First of all, these are not some redneck cranks living in a cabin, you know, in the Upper Peninsula, play acting revolution as part of the Michigan militia, which was treated by our Justice Department, by the Biden Justice Department, as the most dangerous threat to the peace of America. These are urbane influencers with college educations. One of them was a Fulbright scholar. So these are highly educated, urbane influencers. And the New York City of Zoran Mamdani, the communist mayor, gave these people press passes to cover the Mangione trial. And here they are coming outside the courtroom and saying to reporters, I'm very glad they did this actually, that everybody who's not down with the revolution should be slain publicly and for their families to suffer if they're not also worthy of being slain as well, I suppose. And Mamdani again and his staff had to know who these women were. I read a story today in the Free Press that talked about how difficult it actually is to get credentialed as a member of the media by the city of New York. It is not easy. Somebody from City Journal, a conservative publication from the Manhattan Institute, tried to get a press pass for this and was rejected. So they know who they are giving these passes to. And with these press passes, they have been given the stamp of approval by the city of New York. And this is, if we needed more of them, and we need more of them, but we see this on this program all the time. This is a big mask off moment. Communism is and always will be a political philosophy of mass murder. And they will kill you with these smug and satisfied looks on their faces, with being very stylish, with the hair just so, with the little pompadour over her forehead and everything just perfect, or the goth hipster look over there. And the goth chick said, if we can't change the world, I don't want to be here. Well, you know, that's fine and dandy for yourself. But the point of the revolution is not the point. What she expressed there was that we want to change the world. And if you're not down with that, I don't want you to be here. I'm just going to stop there before we get this entire channel taken down.
Well, I'll pick it up. The These three women remind me of characters in fiction, and they're very good characters. I really find them quite revealing of certain tendencies and a mentality. They remind me very much of a particular fictional character, Madame Defarge, in Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities, which is set during the French Revolution. And Madame Defarge is, in fact, part of the low level in the bourgeoisie. She and her husband own a tavern, I think it was, and she sits beside the guillotine while people are being executed, and she's knitting, and is a very fascinating and well-known character. And I would suggest that anyone who wants to understand where we are today, certainly the communist revolution is a touch point and one that can give us some insights. But it seems to me that this sort of mentality is embedded deeply in modernity from the Enlightenment, the very beginnings of the Enlightenment in the 1700s. And read A Tale of Two Cities, which is set during the French Revolution, and get a really good perspective on where this mentality comes from and where it leads. The fact that such insignificant people as these three young ladies clearly are, they have their credentials from the city of New York. That makes sense to me. Insignificant people who can be used by the authorities to make the case that they want is a very common thing. But I do think that this is embedded in modernity, and it's something that's going to play out over time here as it has elsewhere. And we don't know quite where this is leading, but I have some pretty good ideas.
Yeah, Doug in the chat says it's okay, say what it is, insanity. And I would disagree with that. I think that these women probably are at least somewhat sane. I think they're just evil.
Yes. I agree with you completely. G.K. Chesterton, get in a Chesterton quote, here we go, said that the person who is mad is not the one who has lost his reason. It's the one who's lost everything but his reason. And what Chesterton was saying there is, if your premises are false, you're going to reason correctly no matter what. You may twist things and create fallacies because you're trying too hard to reason and reason away things. But if you are reasoning from bad premises, you are going to reach abominations. And that's what's happening here. They're reasoning from bad premises. That the fact that you do A and B happens down the road, that doesn't mean B was caused by A, and it doesn't mean that you were responsible for it. The notion that this man killed more people than Osama bin Laden is just terrifyingly wrong. But it's logical. It's logical when you take their premises. And I request respectfully, all our listeners, do not take these premises and do not allow people around you. Do not allow people around you to take these premises and to run with them and to pretend that this is the truth. It's not. When something is obviously untrue, it probably is untrue.
Samantha, I don't know if you have much that you want to comment on this. It
feels
like our fellow ladies are not doing okay. They're in New York.
No, I mean, well, first of all, obviously that's morally repugnant. But I'm not surprised. I mean, these are likely the same people that we saw on social media celebrating when Charlie Kirk was killed. As we move into modernity, as we move more into extreme liberalism and socialism, there's almost like I hate to say it, and there's no other word, but like a bloodlust. They are totally fine when anyone who does not fit their narrative is killed, whether it's a capitalist in the case of I believe it's Brian Thompson. I'm not sure if I'm misremembering that. Or if it's someone who is not like a person of color. How many white people have been killed in New York City, and then they continue to let all of these violent criminals back out onto the street without parole, and then you can continue to have repeat offenders and so much violence in New York City. I think in general, it's just the push to the ultra left into socialism, and ultimately, without getting too religious, it's a departure from Christ. We're no longer a Christian nation. We're supposed to, or most religions, most Abrahamic religions, they condition you, and you are taught to love everyone and treat everyone with respect and not bring harm upon anyone. And these people are so out of touch with those basic principles, those principles that guided our founders, those principles that guided the foundation of the creation of our laws. And yeah, they're happy some children are fatherless. It's disgusting. But yes, that's my take.
It reminds me, it had never crossed my mind that there existed people who unironically thought that it was just to kill the children of the Romanovs. But I recently started coming across people online, especially like on Blue Sky and those, cesspits of leftist thought, who would say things like, well, it actually is good to kill the children of the Tsar, because even if they were disenfranchised and disinherited, they still would have that memory of their parents and the lifestyle that they were used to growing up in. And it was likely that they would be able to climb to some kind of prominence on their own afterwards. And we can't have that. So it's good that the children were killed. And I thought, just like what Sam was just saying about like terrible logic, you're like, yeah, you're probably right. If the children of the Romanovs were allowed to survive, they almost certainly would have become wealthy on their own right. It's evil. It's catastrophically, unspeakably evil to support that position, and yet it's logical.
Right, and that just kind of goes into what I was saying. Anyone that does not fit their narrative of convenience, or is like in the way of their ultimate worldview or the goal of the world that they want to live in, they would happily celebrate the violence and the death of. And I mean, that actually Machiavelli writes about that in The Prince, about discontinuing bloodlines and wiping out entire civilizations if you are to continue to move on. And I only say that to kind of sound smart like Sam. I'm going to reference some old political philosophy just once in the show, so I could have my name on the check mark on the tick board next to Sam. It is a school of thought that has been promulgated throughout centuries, but it's an inherently amoral one, and like I said, anti-Christian and anti anyone who believes in any god.
Yeah, well, and Darren and Loki in our comments here just said, I thought it was interesting that they praised the Second Amendment. I know that they were claiming it is there to murder, but it's the first time I've heard any far left person support the Second Amendment. Well, yeah. Fortunately for you, you are shielded, I guess, from the very far left in this country, because the very far left in this country has been not pro 2A necessarily, but certainly pro them getting to have firearms. There's entire communist and socialist gun clubs in this country, and there have been for many decades. They just haven't been so prominent until recently. And I only laugh because it's kind of, it flies so in the face of the kind of caricature that we have built of what the left is over the last couple of decades, because of the way that they tend to behave. You get like an Obama or Biden or something, who, they're not going to go out and say this kind of stuff that these women are saying with regards to Brian Thompson, but their allies are and have been. These people have always existed. They're just able to be front and center now because we've become so polarized.
Yeah, I mean, we usually talk a lot on this podcast about how ignorant communists are about economics. I mean, Mamdani is that with almost every policy he's proposed. Most prominently his publicly owned grocery store thing, which is laughable. And it's going to take 3 years to build. It's going to cost probably 20 times what it would cost to open a private one, and it will actually make food more scarce. But with those economic arguments, we kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, right? We think they are ignorant rather than stupid or even evil. They just don't understand how the world works. But then when they celebrate the murder of people who disagree with them, it shows that they are not ignorant. They are tyrants. They are evil, and they are endorsing and trying to bring upon this world an evil ideology. They have all of the characteristics of every commie national leader ever, which is an irresistible instinct to handle opposition to their unworkable ideas with murder. One at a time is fine. Mass murder is even better, but it doesn't matter, because the only way to get to utopia is to get rid of the people who are standing in your way. And it is dangerous, obviously, and it is quite, I'm trying not to be angry. I'm trying to think about sadness, but I can't be sad about this. This is the face of evil, that anybody who thinks any murder is justified, because like Sam said earlier, don't accept any of the premises that these women have put forward, because they are not grounded in fact. But and I'm actually even reluctant to even address the issue that they are supposedly talking about, where murder is justified, and that's the cost of healthcare and our insurance system in this country. I would remind, and I'm going to bring this up in the other topics in a much less angry way, but I would remind these three ladies that, well, for one thing, the Heartland Institute published a book by the recently departed Peter Ferrara called The Obamacare Disaster. And we are a free market think tank. And that book was aptly titled, because the argument that more government involvement, government control over the healthcare system is going to bring down prices and make it more affordable and more accessible for people was always never going to work, because it never works that way. And the Heartland Institute, the closer you get from the dollar in your hand to the doctor who's giving you care, the less distance there is between those two things, the more efficient it is, and the cheaper the care becomes. But Obamacare set up a system in which the insurance companies, everybody's insurance rates have gone through the roof. The Heartland Institute, we're a nonprofit organization, but we provide obviously health benefits to our full-time employees, and those costs have been going through the roof over the last 10 years or so, even more. And that is a result of the policies that these three ladies would certainly have voted for if they were old enough to do it back then. But it is the left that created the problem, that in their evil minds think murder is justification to somehow right that wrong. It is the leftist policies that have caused what she thinks is a disaster in the health insurance industry in this country.
Yep, and they'll only make it worse. I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off for a second here.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It
This is no time for joking, Andy.
Yeah, it sure did. We are moving along. Whoop, sorry.
These are the same people who would absolutely celebrate if Donald Trump was killed, or any other conservative member of our government. I know so many people that have said, "Oh my gosh, I hope he has a heart attack." It's just crazy things. It's just absolute. It's a bloodlust. Anyone that stands in their way, they have no human empathy for.
May I quickly add that demonization of your opponents is this is exactly where that leads. And that's what's been going on for decades now. And demonization of your opponents are normal people who are just trying to live and just trying to make their way in the world. This man who was killed, I'm sorry, I can't even remember his name.
Brian Thompson.
Yes, Thompson. And he was a CPA, a certified public accountant, and he worked hard. And he just made it to an important position in the world. Who knows? Maybe he would have done very good things. We won't have that chance to find out.
Yeah.
I think, I'm sorry, I think one very important thing on top of what Sam says is that if we continue to demonize our opponents, there will never be common ground met. There is, you completely throw out any propensity for resolution if the other side is evil and if you view them as such. And I think that's where we've gotten in our mainstream political ideology, which leads us to a lot of the problems that we deal with at the Heartland Institute. But it's deeply problematic and troubling.
Absolutely. Right. Well, Jim had alluded to, how health insurance or healthcare in general has gotten so expensive. So that's why the main topic today is about the cost of living crisis. We're not going to get into the healthcare stuff too much this time around, because there are some other angles to hit this from. And I really wanted to talk about this. And part of the reason why is because, Sam, you just had a new housing affordability policy study come out. And also at the same time, there's a viral discussion going on, or just the discourse on the Gen Z part of X, where everybody is arguing over whether it's reasonable to suggest that young people might have a spending problem. And so before I get into this topic, I'm going to offer a trigger warning here. In this segment, we are going to be generalizing about different generations of Americans. If you are of the generation being discussed and what we say does not apply to you, then you are not who we are talking about. I am a millennial, I think, technically. I might be a zillennial, just right on the edge there in 95. I do not strongly identify with the stereotypes of my generation. And yet I do not get mad when people make generalizations about millennials and, they call it the me generation. We have to be able to generalize about generational habits and statistics in order to help explain why those habits are changing over time amid different generations. Population averages are not indictments of your individual character. So that is my warning. Every time we have to talk about different generations, we get comments from people upset or feeling offended that we said mean things about boomers, or we said mean things about Gen X or millennials or whoever. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about statistical averages. So, Gen Z, two things can be true about Gen Z. One, the economy is really rough. You just entered the workforce during COVID or afterwards or just before, and inflation has been absolutely insane due to the government. We will talk about that in a minute. But also, look, guys, it would not kill you to skip DoorDash once in a while. What is it? Usually something like $30 for a single meal delivered to you with all the fees and everything. If you skip it for a while, a couple of weeks doing without, you can set that cash aside and put it into something that can help protect what you've earned better than Chipotle can. Precious metals do not taste all that great. They are not good for your digestive system, but they are good for your savings. And that is why at In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of the other metals selling guys. And that's because we know that the person running the place is the best of the best. A great friend of Liberty, Ira Brzezinski, owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. That's a lot of words. What does it mean for you? Well, it means everything that Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. So he's not going to hit you with a bait and switch. He's held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency there, which is way too lacking in other places nowadays. We'll talk a bit about that. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that's easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He will make it very easy for you. Please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. When you talk to Ira, let him know that we are the ones who sent you. That helps us while you're helping yourself and your financial future by diversifying with precious metals at Advisor Metals. Thank you very much. All right. With that out of the way, I really don't about them. Affordability right now is more difficult for millennials and Zoomers and than older generations right now. 84% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 24 believe that the economic conditions in the United States are either bad or terrible. 81%, that's 84% of 18 to 24-year-olds. 81% of 25 to 29-year-olds believe that economic conditions are bad or terrible. So the vast majority of people under 30 years old believes that things are awful. Housing is the biggest issue that has a large difference in that generational impact, I think. High home prices benefit people who have houses already, but it makes it harder to get that first home. So, Sam, you recently wrote a study on this and discussed it in a Life, Liberty, Property article. So, in your report, you say that monetary inflation in the early 2020s aggravated long-term housing affordability crunches and turned it into a housing crisis. Reducing inflation will alleviate the short-term crisis. The nation must then turn to the long-term problem, a stagnant supply of housing. So if you can expand on that a little bit or tell us.
Yeah, thank you, Linnea. The premise of the paper is, well, the idea of the paper, in fact, is to correct the record and make it clear why we have an affordability crisis. And the short story of it is, I encourage people to read the paper. It's done in terms that regular people can understand. It's not too technical, I don't think. But the key thing is that we have had a housing affordability problem now for really a few decades. And the big reason behind that is that the amount of housing that we're building has been decreasing for a variety of reasons. But all those reasons are caused by government. And it's the federal government and the state and local governments have put so many restrictions on housing. And the federal government and the central bank, which is a product of the federal government, let's remember that the Federal Reserve, although it's supposed to be independent and so on and so forth, was created by government in the first place. So this is all, these are all products of government actions. And these government actions restrict what people can do in terms of building, selling, buying, and occupying housing, and maintenance and things like that are all also affected too. So interest rates, for example, affect the housing market very much. Well, what has happened here is that over the decades, it's become more and more difficult to buy a house and to afford a house because we have had an incredible amount of immigration. Our population is 1/3 bigger than it was in the 1980s when we got a deal that immigration would be slowed. And remember, President Reagan signed off on that. And some cynics at the time suggested that, well, you're going to get your amnesty, but you're not going to get your cuts in immigration. And that was exactly what happened. So because we've added so many people to the market, so many buyers, and on top of that, we have added many more in the 21st century because the millennial generation and the Generation Z, the Zoomers, have hit the marketplace in the last, about the last decade or so. And so you've had an incredible intensification of people wanting to buy homes, and in particular, wanting to get those starter homes. And on top of that, the building of homes decreased radically starting in 2008 because of the Great Recession and the intensifying restrictions on finance, which were brought about by the Barney Frank bill, which is in the late Barney Frank, who just died a day or so ago. That put so many great heavy restrictions on how you finance things that it really just shot the market of from creating sufficient supply. So the number of new houses being built has been very low since Dodd-Frank. So those are all things caused by government. And then on the local level, which is local governments are made by the state. So the states are responsible for this. But on the local level where this is occurring, obviously you have zoning. But on top of that, you have an incredible amount and a very elaborate code, building code items and restrictions. And those are based, yes, on safety, but they're also based on the convenience of the profits of the big players in that world. So if you make things very complicated, what happens? People have to hire somebody to do things that ordinarily they might be able to do themselves. So all of this adds to the expense. So the government has made housing much, much, much more expensive. And so you put all that together, housing now for a lot of young people costs more than 50% of their wages. Now, this is very interesting because when you make that comparison between the millennials and the boomers, you find that the wages and incomes for millennials are higher than boomers at the same age. What boomers were making when you correct for inflation was less than what millennials are getting now. So that's an interesting statistic. And then housing, in fact, is less expensive for millennials and Zoomers than it was for boomers. Now, wages have been rising much more rapidly than inflation since the beginning of last year. So we had this huge burst of inflation, and that played out through the economy and made people feel much less wealthy than they were. And that has to, and it came up so fast that it takes a long time for wages to catch up. Now, we're never going to have the prices go back down. That's not how things work. But what you do is the wages rise more rapidly so that your real income catches up and kills off the effects of the original inflation. But that takes time. It's going to take easily 2 or 3 years to 5 years to get it all wrung out. But the reports are continually and consistently about what young people feel about the economy. And as I mentioned, and I mention all this in the life, liberty, property item, that there's a reason they feel that way. It's not irrational. And that is the enormous cost of higher education. The cost of a college degree has more than doubled in inflation-adjusted terms, not just nominal terms, but in real terms, since the boomers went to college. And the quality of the product has absolutely plummeted. Now, this was all caused by, guess who? The government. Massive increase in federal spending on higher education. And it was absolutely metastasized during the Obama administration. The amount of spending on federal spending on higher education has been incredibly high. Now, this money poured in, all right? And because it was borrowed, and the expected payoff of a college degree was very high, it was terrific. So the customers didn't pay as much attention to the fundamental quality of the product. The students and the parents were just, okay, this is what it takes to get a college degree. So today's younger workers, especially those who have those college degrees, they had every reason to expect that they would be getting twice the real wages that the boomers got. Now, that was impossible. It was never going to happen. And so that disappointment has led to anger, to blame, to scapegoats. And the scapegoats are capitalism and capitalists, which is exactly what they were taught in college. And those three young ladies that we saw at the beginning of this episode are absolutely perfectly characteristic of that. So this is the real problem, that the generation, that the two generations that have been coming into the workforce and the housing market in the last few years, the millennials and the Zoomers, were given a story about themselves and about their situation that was simply false. It was terribly false, and it was wrong for people to do that. And we at the Heartland Institute have been saying for years the truth about what was really going on. So as a result of all this, the higher education sector is going into a much needed reorientation, and it's going to bring lower prices and better product, but it's going to take a while. Harvard University just announced it's ending grade inflation. We'll see if that turns out to be true. But the point is that this is playing out now to repair what government did. It's going to be up to the young people who are affected by this whole situation, who are feeling this disappointment, to recognize the reality behind it. Who actually caused this? I'm not saying who is to blame. I'm just saying who caused it and what caused it. It wasn't capitalism. It wasn't the greedy landlords. It wasn't greedy investors. Having money, having private investing money coming into any field is a good thing. You get more of whatever it is you're investing in. So it wasn't those people. It was government that did this. And the government that did this was elected by the boomers, the lost generation before them, Generation Jones, Generation X, and yes, the millennials. So we were all part of this. But what could we do? What could those of us who oppose this do? We at the Heartland Institute have told the truth over the years, and what we very strongly understand to be the truth. So we need to get that out there, and that's what the purpose of this paper is, and that's what the purpose of shows like this are, and all the follow-up work we're doing in articles and op-eds and the like, is to show people that that capitalism is not the problem. Markets are not the problem. We don't have free markets. Free markets are the solution. So we need to spread that word, and I encourage everyone who watches the show and listens to it to spread that word and to get this information out to their friends and associates and family.
Yeah, and also, this is something that I try to hammer in as much as I can, but it doesn't really seem to stick with, certain groups just have a really hard time with this. Telling like Gen Zers that their concerns are not anything to be concerned about, and that they're just like, egotistical, stupid, greedy, whatever, is not going to stop them from voting for a Mom Donnie who says, actually, no, your expectations are fine for life. It's the capitalists that are stealing from you, and all these people who are calling you lazy and entitled and blah, blah, blah. They're the ones who have put these conditions on you, and they're going to take that route. So there needs to be like some kind of empathy for young people from the older generations. However, two things can be true at once. One, cost of living for young people is difficult. They have a lot of unique challenges that they're facing, whether it's, you are convinced, or it's hammered into you from like 8th grade until senior year of high school that you have to go to college in order to get a good job. And that, and they're like taking away our technical schools and stuff in high schools. They're, at my high school, at least, it was like a given that you were going to get into college. I believe that certain schools in certain states, certain public schools in certain states, receive like rankings based on how many of their students go on to college. And so there's a huge incentive from high schools to push everybody onto the college track, whether or not it's reasonable. You can't blame a 18-year-old or a 17-year-old for having that message being shoved down their throat, from every angle, from, most of the time, many of their parents, from the media, from their teachers, school administrators. Everyone is trying to get you on that college track. And then you do it. And then you graduate 4 years later or 5 years later with a degree that cost you $50,000 a year. You were just doomed from the start. And so I think that there needs to be, kind of like a reasonable, balanced discussion about this, not just saying that Gen Z are stupid and entitled. And then, so now that everybody has these degrees, they are not, the competition for jobs that require degrees is immense. And the value of a bachelor's degree is much lower than it was, at the same time as the monetary cost to get one is much higher. So that's an incredible difficulty there. And also our culture is just like rotting from the inside out. So they're dealing with that as well. So I want to emphasize to any Gen Zers who are watching this that we're not, we are about to talk about a spending problem that Gen Zers do have, but we're not blaming you for the economic conditions that you live in, except on this one point. All right. So that's my transition here. And I'm going to see if I think we have a clip for this. Hang on just a second. So we have a clip of Kevin O'Leary talking about, oh yeah, actually we can go to this first now that Andy has brought this up on screen. Okay. This is a credit card company study from a credit card company out of Canada, I believe. I do think that these numbers are probably about right for Americans as well, especially metropolitan area living Americans. As you can see, it's not just Gen Z. Every single generation has increased the relative percentage of their spending on food, on restaurant and delivery compared to the generation before them. Every single generation spends more eating out, not in terms of percentage of the amount of money that they spend on food than the previous. On the one hand, I would say this is evidence that we're actually like relatively richer than we were in the past, and also that there's a lot more availability of different like eating out options. Of course, since COVID, especially, the delivery services absolutely exploded. There's like, I don't know, like 20 different companies that you can choose from to have your food delivered to you. You can even have even more than in the past, your groceries delivered to you. And each subsequent generation has taken more and more advantage of these services. However, the fact of the matter is that Gen Z does eat out a lot more than previous generations. But if you're already struggling, or you feel like you can't afford a home, or you can't afford whatever, spending a large percentage of your food budget on eating out is not the way to go. We are all part of this trend, but it's not such a good strategy here. We have a clip from Kevin O'Leary that I want to pull up.
Can't stand it when I see kids that are making 70 grand a year spending $28 for lunch. I mean, that's just stupid. It's just, think about that in the context of that being put into an index and making 8 to 10% a year for the next 50 years. Stop buying coffee for $5.50. I can walk around with anybody for a day and show you that they're wasting 15% of their money, sometimes 20. Stupid stuff. You go to work, you spend $15 on a sandwich. What are you, an idiot? It costs you 99 cents to make a sandwich at home and bring it with you. So what if you bring it with you? Bring your own water if you have to, or your own drink, or bring your own coffee mug. You start to add that up every day, it's a ton of money. Most people, particularly working in metropolitan cities that are just starting out on their job, making their first $60,000, piss away about $15,000 a year on stupid stuff. And that's what they should stop doing.
May I say quickly, okay, boomer, but...
Oh, don't start.
But he's right. He is right that if you care about these things, and if you care about your future, you will make sandwiches and bring them in, or hard-boiled eggs, whatever it is you like. And yes, bringing in your own water and even maybe spritzing in some flavor into it or whatever. But the problem is that the millennial generation and the Gen Z have been brought up in a time of incredible inflation. And what inflation does is it flattens the time the time preference, meaning you would rather spend money now than later, because money spent now buys more than it will a few weeks from now, let alone a year or a month from now. So it's hard to convince people that they're getting a good deal if they save their money and invest it instead of just buying things. And that the reason it is hard to convince them is because it's false. It's not true that they're going to get a better deal by putting the money aside. We were getting nothing from our bank account. If you put money in a bank and just put it in a savings account, you were getting literally nothing. What was it, 0.0025% or something? And so and all of this was caused by government regulations. So you are making it foolish to save, and you're making it foolish to invest in small ways, to invest in small ways. And then you say, you fool, you're not investing in saving. Well, maybe they're the ones who are thinking straight, and you're the ones who are causing all the problems. It's no maybe, in my view, they are the ones causing all the problems. None of this is caused by market failure. What is all caused by is government stupidity.
Yeah, Jim,
and that's my rant.
Thank you, Sam. That was a very good rant. But Jim, I do think, Kevin is right insofar as he's saying, if you're worried about cash for rent and stuff, then you shouldn't be spending money on, eating out so much or whatever. And in metropolitan area, it's actually very difficult just from social pressure not to do that, right? It's the same with, we all spent probably ate out a lot more in college than I do now, just because like the social pressure, I don't mean pressure in like a negative way. I just mean it in like, you're living with a bunch of young people and they're like, hey, we're going to go out and get pizza or whatever. And you're like, okay, I'll come with. And then you end up spending like all of your money on food, and sometimes adult beverages. But I do understand that this clip of Kevin O'Leary went viral and young people are furious at it. I can understand, even if he's right in some ways, I can understand why the optics of a extraordinarily wealthy person telling people to pack a lunch is not great. It would get you kind of angry, it's so I feel I have a lot of empathy for or sympathy rather for the frustration when this guy is talking like this. But how do we fix it? Because it's kind of between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, you have people online right now who are saying like having hot meals delivered to their house from Chick-fil-A or whatever is a human right. And on the other hand, you have people saying the economy is terrific. You have nothing to worry about.
Well, neither of those things are true. There's somebody from the Heartland Institute who has been on this podcast quite a bit. I see him in the office, every week, and we have lunch together. About half the time I bring leftovers from home. Half the time I'll run downstairs. There's a little cafeteria in our building, and I'll grab a sandwich and, come upstairs. And yeah, it's about as expensive as Kevin O'Leary says. They should be paying $15 for a sandwich, but that's just the price of things today. Thank you, Biden economy and the skyrocketing inflation, which is very unfortunate. It hits everybody, but it does hit younger people just getting their career started harder than anybody else. And that's absolutely true. But this person I'm talking about never gets lunch outside. He has a young family that he has started, and I've even offered to buy him a sandwich, and he says, nah, it's fine. And because he brought his own, every day he does this. So, Kevin O'Leary's brand is to be, he is jokingly, I think he calls himself Mr. Wonderful, which is the inverse of what he is, because on Shark Tank, he is probably one of the meanest ones, if not the meanest person on that show. It's his shtick. I get it. And nobody wants to hear that the way they're living their life is the main source of their financial problems. But the fact remains that, no matter who you are, there is some truth to that, to that statement. And nobody really likes to hear it, especially younger people. You pointed out very correctly, Linnea, earlier, when you talked about student debt. It's much, much, much worse now than it was when I went to college between 1988 and 1992. And why is that? It was because of the free government loans for everybody. So it right as Gen Z was starting to begin their adult lives, the difference between the cost of something or the price of something and its actual value was being completely separated, because you could just apply for a government student loan. It doesn't, so there was no real cost to you in the beginning, so you didn't really grasp it. And I was actually talking with my wife about this today. We knew we were going to talk about this today. When I was a young man, I was not wealthy by any means. I worked 2 jobs, and it's hard to save money when you have to use all of your money to pay for bills. And I had to do that too. It's tough for every generation when they start out, believe it or not. I know that, there's all sorts of reasons why there are unique challenges to the rising generation right now. But that does not mean that the generations before you did not have their own challenges that were just slightly different, but financially we're not that much different than we are today. But one thing I remember, I saw this commented on Twitter this week, and I think it's pretty apt. Money used to be money, right? It was cash. It was in your hands. And it's harder to save, I think, when you don't ever really see your own money. I mean, again, I'm Gen X, and of course we had credit cards. I had a credit card. But we used to go to ATMs. Remember ATMs? I think they're pretty much a dead technology today. I can't remember the last time I went to an ATM. In fact, I've been carrying around the same, I've accumulated $20 bills. I think I'm carrying about $212 in my pocket for 3 years, because I never use cash. Nobody goes to the ATM. But when I was a young man, I'd go to the ATM, I'd sit there and think, oh gosh, can I get $60 out? I should probably just get $40 out. I should just get $40 out. That's all I need to go out with my friends. And then guess what? Guess what's on that little receipt that would come out? What's left in your checking account, which was, $212, and my next paycheck is not coming for another 4 days. And so I was always acutely aware of how poor I was every single day when I needed to have money. But today, like I said, I don't use cash anymore. I get annoyed if anybody even asks for cash. I use Venmo and PayPal and all sorts of stuff. But certainly Gen Z, I'd actually love to see if somebody could look this up. What percentage of Gen Z even has a traditional bank account? Is all their money just put into a Venmo account or to PayPal and everything is digital? So I think when you're separated from real physical money, from having to balance a checkbook, from having to write out checks and put them in an envelope and mail it off to the cable company, I think it certainly doesn't help your financial literacy when you don't really actually ever see physical money.
Samantha, how about you? I know you have a young family, and you guys are, you've run into all the same struggles that all the rest of us have. So I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, well, I guess I would consider myself one of the also anomalies. I remember coming out of college and taking my first job, and my salary was so low that I would literally go through the grocery store once a week and be doing math in my head as I was pulling things off the shelf. I'd be like, okay, this plus this will feed me for 4 days, and then that means I have $15 more to spend at this trip to the grocery store, and absolutely lived off of soup and popcorn and ramen noodles and cereal and all the other fun caricature type foods that absolutely you can live off of if you are on a budget. And I would occasionally DoorDash, but it was a very special treat for me. But no, I think it's to build off of what Jim has said. I have so many I think I'm the last millennial. I am 1996. So I'll be 30 this year. So this is I think, yeah, technically, I'm the very last of them. But I have so many friends who have said verbatim, well, we're not going to be able to buy a house anytime soon. Might as well just have fun now, or might as well just go get Starbucks or
Yeah.
order in. It's a really unhealthy set of logic, but it's true. And the supply and demand is so hard. There are so many boomers that are homeowners and have homes, and I live in a metropolitan city, and just you have to inherently be bidding $80,000 over the asking price to even consider winning a bid for a home, much less being able to afford the down payment or the mortgage. But we are in a culture that has promulgated just reckless spending. How quickly can you go onto Amazon and just order things you need? Same with DoorDash. And exactly to Jim's point, you're not using cash. Everything is pulled digitally. All of your bills are pulled digitally. If you select the paperless option for your gas company or your electric company, you're not even physically seeing how much money you spent on utilities that month unless you are hawking your bank account every day, which everyone should be to know what's going in and out. That's my like unsolicited financial advice, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I have a young son. I have two young sons, but the one who can speak will be like, "Oh, mommy, like just order it off of Amazon," like, so nonchalantly, like that, because I'll tell him, "Oh, we need this," and I'll order it. But in his mind, you just click a few buttons on a phone and it'll show up at your house. And I think as much as he's 3, so he's a toddler, but there are, I feel like, adults who feel that way too. Like, "Oh, just order it off of Amazon. I need it. I'll get it now." We're almost living in an age of ultra comfortability. Everyone needs to be 100% comfortable all of the time. And I think that that's our problem. No one is like really, well, now people are really struggling, but like if you are like me and you grew up in the 90s and I had one parent who worked and we lived a comfortable life, I have enjoyed growing up in an America that was prosperous and that where we could have little not excessive luxuries, but my family could go out to dinner, yeah, and we could go to Disneyland and we could go and take a family vacation once a year. And now those are things that are becoming further and further out of touch for young Americans. And it is a culmination of the student loan debt, the like housing affordability crisis, what food costs, insurance. And I think, and this is, I'm kind of going on a rant now, but in my mind, and in so many others, I'll speak for so many others, the American dream, the American way was that you will work hard and you will be able to provide a life for your family that you did not have. So my parents never went to college, but I was able to go to college and I paid for it with loans. And my husband was the same way. And now we are working very hard to save for our kids so that who knows if college will even be relevant or whatever in 20 years, but we're trying to save for them so that they can go to college and not take out loans, so that when they enter into the workforce they can focus on saving for a house instead of spending anywhere from 10 to 20% of their income on student loan debt. And that's the dream, and that's where I think we're getting so lost, is so many people are working so hard to keep themselves above water that they're asking themselves tough questions like, should I have a family? Should I start a family? Will I have one kid or will I have two? Like, and it's really stunting a lot of the decisions that these people make. So again, then you say, wow, that's really stressful. I'm kind of sad. I'm going to order some Chick-fil-A to feel a little bit better. And like maybe that milkshake, the cookies and cream milkshake, will like make me feel a little sad about my dystopian future of a life. And don't even talk about AI maybe taking your job in a few years. So not to give a lot of excuses for these younger generations, because I've done it. I've been strict on a budget. I still am on a budget with my family. Um, but it's hard. Psychologically, it's hard. And it's not fun having wealthy older people tell you that you shouldn't get Chipotle, which you shouldn't. But anyways, that's my rant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've heard the same thing from friends of mine, but especially people from like my sister's generation. She's a couple years younger than me, and what I'm hearing it called is financial nihilism, where they're thinking like, "Look, I'm not going to be able to save for a house by skipping DoorDash." Like,
Right.
so I may as well like enjoy a meal that I like right now, because I'm not going to be able to afford a family and a house and vacations and whatever. So why would I like, live small when it's not going to pay off in the long term? And so, and I really do understand that perspective. I don't think that it's the right perspective to have. But
I
it's,
think
again, not an irrational one.
I was going to say, I think frontal lobe development helps. Like, I know for a fact that when I turned 25, I was like, oh, wow, like things make so much more sense now. Like, I could, and I joke about that all the time. I love like brain science and the way that it affects decision making. And something that I don't think is talked about nearly enough is that all of these young people, most of them from college to entering the workforce, scientifically do not have the fully developed frontal lobe, which is the part of your brain that tells you, like, helps you make long-term decision, domino effect thinking, especially with finances. Um, so and another just random Samantha anecdote is that's why I think people should not be able to vote until they're 25, or at least about paying for their own health insurance. That's we've always joke around the Heartland Institute with various voting reforms. I'm like, that you have to be paying for your own health insurance if you want to cast a vote in this country. Completely derailing the topic. But that's what a lot of younger people feel that way. And then I hear those things and I'm like, well, yeah, like that's not good logic, but it makes sense and you're young. And it's so hard. I actually have to jump off now, you guys. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to use this to say goodbye. This was such a joy and I hope to see you guys soon. I'll see you guys.
Freddie, we'll have you on again
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
bye, guys.
Samantha.
So long,
Yeah.
Sam. I just want to.
Let me see here.
I know. I just real quick.
Okay,
I call it
let me see.
economic
Okay,
blackpilling.
I'm so
You know,
sorry.
it's like why even bother saving? Like you said, Linnea. You know, they've just taken the black pill. They've given up. It's completely understandable, I think, in today's economy.
The attitude that Linnea and Sam, that you both articulated a few moments ago, is we have to understand where it's coming from, though. It is caused by policy. There's the high expense of houses is caused by high regulation. That's really what is coming from the suppression of supply, and the high inflation is caused by government, high federal spending. I demonstrate this in the paper. High federal spending brought on the inflation because the Federal Reserve, the central bank, had to monetize it, is what it's called. It's a process, and you can get it from the paper. But the fact is that excessive government spending causes inflation. There's simply no way around it. And so this attitude that, well, I'm not going to be able to afford a house is not irrational. And the notion that you would say, look, if I can't afford a house, why do I care whether I buy from DoorDash or I make a sandwich myself? There's no difference. It's not an irrational thought. It's got some foundation to it. And so what we need to understand is why the fundamentals of our economy have got so off track. And I think we can get into some pretty good theories about who benefits from this and why governments would do these things. And it seems pretty clear to me that we've created a crony capitalist system that is nothing like free markets. And the solution to this is not more government, more of the things that created the problem in the first place. The solution is the thing that was destroyed by government and that will solve the problem by freeing people to build houses and to buy houses as they wish, which will make prices make sense. The prices of things make sense when people are free to buy and sell. When they're not free to buy and sell, prices don't make sense. And when the currency is debauched, the prices don't make sense. So fix those two things. Fix regulation, fix the currency through lowering spending. And young people will start to save for houses. Right now, doesn't make any sense for a lot of people.
Yeah, let me just add to that a little bit. Like you said, Sam, government policy is what's made the economy not as strong as it could be, because, and especially, and frankly, it's leftist Democrat policy. It's not that Republicans are perfect on this topic. That is certainly not the case. But a lot of the troubling economic conditions that we are in right now are the result, especially over the last 4 years before Trump's second term, of the policies of the Biden administration. And before that, QE1 and QE2 and QE3, all this money printing. Government spending absolutely exploded at the end of Trump because of COVID, but then it just kept going up and up and up under Biden. The more the government it spends and is involved in the economy, the less power that the dollar in the private sector has. It's competition works in the economy too when it comes to money. But what is the number one? Put it this way: Democrats, if you were to take it by age groups, have one age group that votes more for the Democrats than any other age group. If you take it from young people to middle-aged and to older people, and that's young people. I looked it up last night. It's around 60% of Gen Z votes Democrats. In fact, well, we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. Those three disgusting, evil women are Gen Z, and they're socialists, right? But you're voting for the policies that are creating the bad economic conditions that you're in. As you tend to get older and understand better how the economy works and how life works, you tend to be more conservative over time. But Gen Z is, in a way, not to blame them, but they're voting for these policies that are making life more difficult for them and making the economy harder to recover. Because Sam, you say it on this podcast probably at least 3 times per podcast that we do not have a free market in the United States. That we've never actually experienced free market capitalism. We have something very, very different from that, but it's still better than full-on socialism. And then just one last thing, we had that graphic up on where each generation gets their food, and I think the number was 64%. Where is it? There it is. No, 68% of the food Generation Z eats is either at a restaurant that they go to or have it delivered right to their door through DoorDash or something else. There is no justification for having that percentage of the food that you eat for your entire life coming from restaurants or having it delivered to you. So there is quite a bit of truth to what Kevin O'Leary said in the clip that's gone viral and has had generations bashing their digital heads against each other on Twitter for the last 36 hours or so.
Yeah.
But that's not sustainable. You can't live like that. No, you shouldn't live like that. Learn how to cook. Cooking at home is actually a pleasure. I do it. I love to cook.
Yeah. Well, so the arguments that I've seen to that end are, well, I've seen some really stupid arguments from left-wing journalist Taylor Lorenz said that, people who are struggling financially or poor people don't have the time or the capacity, was the word she used, to cook a home-cooked meal, which is incredibly insulting, I would think. The time thing is one thing. There are a lot of people, though, who work, multiple shifts, multiple jobs, and they still somehow manage to have time to cook for themselves. It's a issue of priorities, but I also think that there is probably a very significant amount of cultural influence. I think that because, in general, previous generations have been have succeeded in building wealth. A lot of these kids are probably raised more than in the past. I know I'm going to get comments from Gen Zers who are like, we were poor when I was growing up. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about in general. There was more affluence in their childhoods, and now they're downwardly mobile, which is something that's somewhat unique in American history. I do think it's true that Gen Z and also part of millennials, especially after they come out of college in massive debt and they got a degree in something that they thought they were going to be able to find a job in, and it turns out that job doesn't actually exist anymore. They are downwardly mobile. And so they grew up being able to go out to eat every week, or their parents would order, Netflix when they used to order it, and a pizza or whatever every week. They have all the different cable channels. They have HBO. They have all that stuff. And so that's their baseline expectation for how the middle class or even the lower middle class lives. And now they're struggling. And now they're living in, when I lived in South Louisiana, not a wealthy area of the country, I was looking at apartments. This is part of the reason why I ended up moving to South Carolina, not because it's less expensive to live in South Carolina, but just because I could find better conditions for owning my own home. I could not find an apartment that was not like actually in a terrifying neighborhood that I wasn't willing to put up with for less than $2,000 a month. That was crazy. That's in South Louisiana. That's a terrible, terrible price. And I was a little bit spoiled because I lived in a sketchy apartment in college. That was like a tiny studio apartment that's probably a 10-foot by 20-foot cell, basically, that did not have a kitchen, and it was like $450 a month or whatever. That was sketchy enough, but the cost of rent is so phenomenal that these kids are coming out into after they leave college, or even when they're in college. They have all this student debt, and their expectations are that they're going to live at least as well as they did when they went into college with their families. And it's just not the case. I think that's shocking, and it's very depressing and radicalizing, frankly, for a lot of these kids.
Well, suppressing investment is certainly not the way to fix this, which is what the Senate bill, the homeownership bill, would do. It's absurd and stupid and wrong, and we have this tendency to say, well, there's a problem here, and so let's have the government restrict people more so that it'll fix the problem. How are people ever going to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it unless they have the freedom to make the choices to experiment? The people say that states are the laboratories of democracy, but common sense and wisdom come from learning from other people's mistakes. They always say the smart person learns from his mistakes or her mistakes. I think the smarter person, the smartest person, learns from other people's mistakes. And that's what we need. I think we need more freedom to make mistakes. We need more freedom to be wrong and to be stupid and to goof up. And then we can all learn from that and learn exactly what works best. But this system of saving everybody from their own choices is the essence of the problem. And until we get out of that mentality, this is just going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, absolutely. We had another, I pulled a article that just came up, a jobs report that was reported over at Fox News. And it surprised me in some places, did not surprise me in others. Sam, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So the jobs report published over at Fox News here says private payrolls added 123,000 jobs in April, well above the prediction of 75,000. March's gain of 186,000 jobs was also revised up to 190,000. So government payrolls contracted, I wonder why, by 8,000 jobs in April. The federal government's workforce shed 9,000 jobs for the month, while that decline was partially offset by a gain of 1,000 state government jobs. Local government employment was not changed very much. And then the manufacturing sector shed 2,000 jobs in April, as economists polled had expected a gain of 5,000.
I wrote about those elements earlier this week in a piece that is about to appear. This is exactly what's happening. Is that the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress, with a little help from Senator Fetterman, bless his soul, bless his heart, what's going on here is they're trying to normalize things. They're trying to get things back to normal, where the economy actually reflects the choices of human beings, free choices of human beings. When that happens, again, that you get what I mentioned earlier, that process of experimentation, where people try things, they work or they don't work. And if they work, they do it more. If it doesn't work, they do it less. With government, if something doesn't work, they do more of it. When you say, "Oh, we're going to solve poverty by spending more money on it," and then poverty increases, you say, see, we have to spend more money on this. It's the opposite. Politics works the opposite way of free markets and free people. And we need to get more of the latter and less of the former. And as we do that, you will see these things happening where the jobs that we're getting now are real jobs. The jobs that we were getting in 2022, 2023, 2024 were government jobs, and they were not productive. Things get produced in the private economy. You can say that government adds to the value of private economy, that's the Keynesian position, but it doesn't. It's a net negative. And everything other than enforcing contracts, valid contracts that are not products of force or fraud, and stopping force and fraud. That's all government can really do or really should do. And so when you have free choices by free people, you find the truth of what people really want, what really appeals to people, and you can have more of that. When you try to say, this is what people should want, and this is what people are going to get, then you can be wrong all the time. And the more wrong you are, the more sure you are that you were right in the first place. And that is why you have Mamdani as president of New York City.
The idea that there's 115,000 jobs added in April, I'm actually pretty surprised by that. The job numbers haven't looked good for a while, and they probably won't overall for a while, because people forget how many tech jobs have been just zeroed out. I asked Grok, and Grok should know. It's from X. It's from Elon Musk, Mr. Tech himself. That how many? Just give me an estimate of how many since the beginning of 2025, so the beginning of Trump's term. How many tech jobs and then how many media jobs have been eliminated in that time? And the number is about anywhere between 350 and 450,000 tech jobs, according to Grok, have been are no longer necessary mainly because of AI. And how many media jobs? Happily, about 5,000 media jobs. I think that's a pretty good start. We could probably do better than that. But so the idea that jobs numbers are even going up at all, considering the way AI is starting to displace people, it starts in tech. It's coming everywhere. Yeah, as you said, Sam, there's a lot of correcting that needs to go on, and AI is only accelerating that.
The reorientation that's going on in higher education that I mentioned is going on in the economy. We're getting jobs out of government. That's a very good thing. We're also getting jobs out of places that were overvalued. And we're getting a lot of money, especially in capital infusions, and weren't actually making any money. They weren't making products. They weren't making any of the services that anybody wanted.
You know who a lot of the people are that are probably losing their jobs? And I know that there are there are probably coders and stuff who are losing their jobs, but I'll tell you who's definitely losing their jobs. And that's those girls who are going on TikTok and annoying the heck out of everybody, being like, here's a day in the life of my tech job, because she has an email job at a tech company at Google or something. And then she's going in and spending a ton of money on the corporate food in the corporate food lounge or the cafeteria they have downstairs in the corporate campus and stuff, and doing their little TikTok dance girl boss things. Oh, their AI is coming for them for sure. They're probably the first ones that are getting slashed.
Well,
this is a really good point. Job destruction is good as long as job construction is happening, and that's what's happening now.
Yeah. And talking about government financed jobs, I mean, I read a story the other day about higher education that I think 100 universities and colleges have already closed over the last, I think, either 12 or 24 months. And that pace is going to accelerate because of a demographic bomb that has already gone off that people don't realize. The university staff, mostly administration, has exploded over the last 20 years. But the number that physically exists, the number of well, especially certainly for American born children, the number of people who could go to college because they are now 18 and graduate from high school has been shrinking a lot in the United States over the last couple of decades. And so there is less need for university systems the way they are today than there was when I went to school 30 years ago. So you're going to start seeing layoffs unless the federal government's going to bail out all of these colleges. Sure hope not. But you're going to start to see some layoffs at universities, and you're going to see a lot of colleges and universities close.
Yeah. So, you know what, I basically, I don't think, for one, I'm skeptical that AI is going to be as much of a obliterator of jobs in the US as people are presenting, especially if, and we don't touch on the immigration issue all that often on In the Tank, but I think that, you know, the people are starting to look around and say, you know, hey, it's kind of crazy that we're hiring like millions of people who are not permanent residents of the United States. We're hiring all these people from abroad to come and do these, like, not necessarily low skill, but definitely low input, low background jobs that historically, like, people right out of college could do. They could work for a phone bank or something, and, you know, it's mind-numbing, terrible work, but they could do that. So that they could put some money on the table and finish off their degree and go and find the real job that they want to work for. But all of that has been taken up in large part by a lot of both illegal and, you know, H-1B type immigration. And the same is true of our, like, fast food places and stuff, all of that stuff, all those jobs that would traditionally go to younger people that don't have a whole lot of experience in a workforce yet. Have been going to a lot of people from abroad. I think that's probably going to get killed off by AI in part. And from there, I think the people will be so upset about AI taking these types of jobs that there's going to be very little stomach for imported labor from the public anyway. And so I think you might see some returns. That's my optimistic take on what's going to happen. I think you'll see some returns to having people be able to have actual, like, first foot in the door, no experience necessary jobs. I think a lot fewer of those will go to H-1Bs in the future because of AI.
Quite true. And the point is that the bigger point is that whatever it is, whatever is best, whatever's the best use of resources, whatever's the best places for human beings to put their effort will happen if you stop trying to force it. If we stop having if we stop having policies backed by machine guns and jet planes and so forth, telling us exactly what the future should look like, we'll be a lot better off and we'll have a much better future. If the government is deciding everything, then it's going to be much, much, much below what is optimal, simply because, as Friedrich Hayek, the great economist, pointed out, they can't know. They just cannot know all the things that you need to know in order to make those decisions. But what can know is the people en masse, and that is who we should rely on.
Right. So in conclusion, you guys, it is hard for Gen Z out there. It is genuinely difficult. They are struggling. Also, you can probably be a little bit smarter with your budgeting. And all of this is ultimately pretty much just the government's fault. That's kind of the in conclusion of our program here today. We did not get to our third topic, but I think that this was so important that I'm glad that we spent the whole time talking about it anyway. Our third topic was just going to be, or our second topic was just going to be on the what did they call it? The anti-weaponization fund. We can talk about that another time or not at all. I don't know. Anyway, so thank you guys so much for being on the show. Thank you all of our audience members for joining us in the chat and also in our silly little polls. But that is all the time we have today, unfortunately. Thank you everyone for your attention to these matters. And we are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all over the place. Jim, what do you have for our audience today?
We have at the same time on these same channels, the Climate Realism Show is going to be another banger. So I hope to see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Sam?
The affordability paper is available at heartland.org, right on the front page there. I have an article at The Blaze today, and there's also the Substack, stkarnick.substack.com.
Yes, absolutely. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave a review. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists, and also Samantha, who had to duck out a little bit early, but I very much appreciate her coming on. And also, of course, to all of our viewers. We will see you again next week.